officials.
Fox's Greg Palcott. And a down day on Wall Street, the Dow lost 104 points. America's listening to Fox News.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
A Washington state couple who have been serving as foster parents for nearly 7 years are searching for a new place to live.
Edmundo Serena Sanchez and his wife Pawal are trained to handle children with behavioral problems, and over the past 7 years, they have housed and cared for 20 foster children in the Seattle area. But now they've been told to vacate their home to make room for unaccompanied minors. The Serena Sanchez family was renting the home from a group called Friends of Youth. An investigation by King 5 in Seattle says, quote, the organization saw a new funding source with the federal government's Office of Refugee Resettlement and decided to use the house for undocumented immigrant children.
Fox's Trace Gallagher. A man faces serious jail time after confessing to destroying property in Florida.
A 20-year-old man faces between 5 and 20 years in a federal prison after pleading guilty Tuesday to charges stemming from a fire set last May during protest over the death of George Floyd in Tampa. The Justice Department says Terrence Hester Jr. was seen on surveillance video throwing a flaming piece of cloth through a broken window into a Champs sports store. Damage to the store and other nearby businesses during the demonstrations was estimated at $1.25 million. Rich Dennison, Fox News.
And the stage is set for the Final Four in women's college basketball.
2 more 1 seeds on to the Final Four.
And they are headed back to the Final Four for the third time.
Call courtesy of ESPN and the NCAA. South Carolina back in the national semifinal for the first time since 2017, crushing Texas Tuesday 62-34, continuing their run of double-digit victories in San Antonio this year. They'll be facing Stanford on Friday. The Cardinal also back in the Final Four for the first time in 4 years. They rallied to defeat Louisville 78-63 on the back of Lexi Hull's 21 points. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Listen to The Point. Any speaker, anytime. Check us out on your FM radio at 93.3, 104.3 HD3, thepoint.gu, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and tune in. And announcing radio.com. Download the app and hear The Point. Get the latest news, sports, entertainment, and more.
On demand.
Your phone is digital. Your life is digital. And we are too. 93.3, The Point.
76 Circle K, the Subaki Tower, and Spa Ayalam bring you another staycation. We are celebrating Mom and all she does. Win a 2-night stay at the luxurious Subaki Tower, get pampered by Spa Ayalam, and enjoy a delicious lunch and dinner at Casa Oceano. All you have to do is purchase $35 or more in 76 fuel and enter to win a staycation fit for a mom. The more you gas, the more chances of winning. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com or any Circle K location for more information.
Sunday brunch at Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro is back. Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. $28.95 for adults and $14.95 for kids 5 to 11 years old. Call 479-2652 or 2653 for reservations.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I got a little piece here that I picked up out of the Mises website. If you don't know who Ludwig von Mises was, he was one of the famous Austrian economists, and he put some really good stuff out on the web. And here's the title of something that ran on that website over the signature of Jose Nino. And given the gentleman's name, I suppose I could say that from the mouths of babes, oftentimes comes gems. Nino, Jose Nino, yeah. Few political movements can boast success like the firearms movement in the United States. Often overlooked is how before the 1980s there was no concept of licensed, let alone unlicensed concealed carry in the overwhelming majority of the country. The sole exception was Vermont, which through an idiosyncratic state Supreme Court decision in 1903 has had unlicensed carry for over a century. Quote, Vermont carry, the concept of unlicensed concealed carry would be the holy grail for Second Amendment advocates for up to a century. In the intervening decades, in large part motivated by notable transgressions on the right to bear arms during the 1930s and 1960s, activists took to using gradualist methods in their efforts to relax gun control laws at the state level. Starting in the 1970s, Georgia kicked off the modern licensed carry movement after it joined states like Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Washington in enacting some form of licensed concealed carry. Soon thereafter, states began adopting licensed carry one by one, and by the 21st century, most of the nation had some form of licensed concealed carry. At first, the idea of unlicensed carry seemed like a quixotic prospect. Only states like Vermont were capable of adopting. However, the dam broke after Alaska ended America's century-long unlicensed carry dry spell by signing its own constitutional carry bill into law in 2003. An even more pronounced momentum shift took place in 2010 after then Arizona Governor Jan Brewer signed Arizona's constitutional carry bill. From there, a wave of states have followed suit, making constitutional carry the law of the land. Constitutional carry success is not a coincidence. It reflects a concerted effort by many disaffected gun owners who realized the federal government was not responding to their demands to scale back infringement of gun control. And then the article goes on to say, constitutional carry's momentum maintained its course in the Trump era. 5 states, New Hampshire, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, and Kentucky passed constitutional carry legislation of their own when Trump was in office, thus showing signs of a movement that has a life of its own and a willingness to press forward regardless of the partisan winds blowing in D.C. Currently, there are 18 constitutional carry states, meaning the Constitution says you can carry a firearm, you don't need no stinking license because it's in the state constitution. Furthermore, such states as Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Texas are seeking to jump on the legislative bandwagon. From the looks of it, the concept of lawful individuals carrying firearms without a license is not going away anytime soon. Undoubtedly, the level of polarization present in the U.S. can be leveraged in a positive direction. Large swaths of red states are filled with, quote, deplorables. You remember what our President Barack Obama said, though, or I'm sorry, it was Hillary Clinton, the basket of deplorables, yeah. And Barack Obama said, clutching their guns and Bibles, right?
Is that like a bushel or a peck?
Say again?
Is that like a bushel or a peck?
More than likely a bushel. Yeah, a bushel of deplorables. Yeah, get my feedback turned down here. Okay. What's going on here? Okay, now I got it. All right. Large swaths of red states are filled with deplorables who have no love lost for Democrats and Republicans in D.C. One way they could poke D.C. in the eye is by passing legislation such as constitutional carry. And I'm going to speak directly to the firearms aficionados on Guam next. All you folks out there who groove on Tall Tales because of our reverence for the Second Amendment, you could take advice from this column here, and that is, if the laws of Guam were changed, you wouldn't care about the Second Amendment. It wouldn't be an issue anymore. Right now, Guam probably has the most restrictive gun control law in the whole country. Yep. You can't even literally touch a firearm unless you have a firearms license. And it's not easy to get a firearms license. You got to go down to the police department, pony up $20. They take your picture, they take your fingerprints, etc., and then they'll issue you a firearms license. And I think it's a third-degree felony to have a firearm without a license. And that license only allows for open carry. If you want concealed carry, then you have to go through a training program, and you have to prove up that you've been through the training program, go through the process again. Now, the last time I had a concealed carry, or last time I applied, you not only had to do that, you had to submit your fingerprint card to the FBI. So the FBI could run a national background check on you. Then if you buy a firearm, you got like 3 days, assuming you have the firearms ID, you've got like 3 days to take that firearm to the armory at GPD and show it to them, and they will write down the serial number and make a record of that firearm and who the owner is. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, and then we have law on the books that says that if you don't keep your firearm, let's just use the word pistol, in a locked gun cabinet, or if you don't have a trigger lock on it, and that firearm falls into the wrong hands, you are strictly liable for whatever happens because of the use of that firearm or that gun. Strictly liable means that it's not necessary to prove intent or negligence or anything else. Strictly liable is most recognizable in hazardous activities, like if you manufacture dynamite and your factory explodes and someone sues, he doesn't have to prove that you were negligent. All he has to do is show you were legally making dynamite. So we have an extremely restrictive law on the books, and none of our gun advocates seem to be willing to take it on. And it doesn't seem logical, because we've got a couple guys. Oh, Joe St. Augustine's got that stand your ground law, and Tony Atta took us to the Castle Doctrine. So we have a couple of senators that are friendly to gun ownership, and we don't have the strong anti-gunners here. At least we haven't seen them. If they're here, they're in defilade that you might find in the mainland, where, you know, gun control is dog whistle politics for Democrats. If you're a Democrat and you don't even care about guns, yet you don't have one, or you do have one, or whatever, as soon as you hear gun control, you say, I'm a Democrat, so I got to come out and be in favor of that. Dog whistle politics. You know, the dog can hear the whistle, but you can't. The Democrats can hear the whistle, but you can't. So that's Second Amendment for today. Let's go to the Daily News as part of Zemi Ikotny. And today we have, he was just here a couple days ago, a gentleman named, if he were on Guam, he would be Raul Regis. I suppose the Daily USA Today thinks he's Raul Reyes, right? He's an attorney and member of the USA Today Board of Contributors, Raul Regis. And here's what he says: stay in your lane. GOP, let Biden do his job at the U.S.-Mexico border. And my only
leave him alone.
My only comment is, okay, I'm ready. When is he going to start?
His handlers first.
Yeah. Donald Trump blamed President Biden recently for the situation at the U.S. southern border. We did a lot of things, and all of that is now eroded, the former president said on Fox News. Today they're coming in from all foreign countries. It's a disgrace. His word echoed another recent sentiment by prominent Republicans after visiting the border last week. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy described the Biden border crisis. Now, if you use the word crisis in the White House, Jen Psaki will come along and wash your mouth out with soap. We don't have any crisis. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said Biden's open border policies are inviting more illegal immigration. The line of attack from the GOP is long on posturing and short on solutions. Republican leaders are not engaging in good faith dialogue about unaccompanied children at the border. Instead, they're ignoring history and reality in favor of partisan rhetoric. I'm not going to go on with it any further. This is pretty much like the same thing the last time we gave him a little airtime here on Tall Tales.
Imagine driving your car towards a brick wall and somebody saying, you're going to head towards a brick wall, and you constantly say, enough about the bad stuff. Let's talk about solutions.
Exactly, yeah. And that's, of course, Trump's fallacy. He's not talking about solutions. Okay, now with respect to the Post today, this is going to be a pretty good-sized part of the program, because the Post, I'm going to tip my hat here, no suspense today, without even reading the first word. I've got my blue pencil handy, and there it is. Yeah. Land Trust Commission needs leadership who is beyond reproach. Jack Haddock is a former high school educator, former senatorial candidate, Guam National Guard soldier, and a former private sector employee whose first major role as a public official started in 2019 at the cusp of Governor Lulian Guerrero's administration. Haddock is the administrative director of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. The commission spun off as its own entity with a separate administrative director after the Department of Land Management was embroiled in a controversy just a few years ago that allowed applicants to skip past many other applicants who'd waited for years, even decades, for a piece of land they could farm or build a home on through the CLTC's land lease program. Some of the applicants who were able to skip the line were also awarded prime land, while others had to settle with land that's too remote to have affordable access to power, water, and wastewater line connections. The creation of the CLTC Administrator Director position post-controversy has created expectations by the public that the administrator would be beyond reproach. Boy. It is a job that, given the lessons of land management's past faults, would give him a better perspective to proceed with caution when standing at ethical and legal crossroads. What Haddock did when faced with a recent legal and ethical test could raise doubt on whether he was fully appreciation for his duty to the public who pays him and to the thousands of land trust applicants who expect him to do his job fairly, legally, and with caution. Recently, by Haddock's own admission, he inserted his comments in a land agent staff report. The land agent who wrote the report has previously stated she felt coerced by Haddock into recommending the approval of a land lease application transfer from one applicant to another. When the land agent balked at recommending a transfer that was not allowed by law, Haddock went ahead and wrote on the land agent's report recommending approval. So he changed her report. I don't blame her for coming to the Land Trust Commission meeting and saying, hey, hold on. Haddock has said in a commission meeting in February, although he did not force his subordinate to make any changes to the report, he did, however, add his recommendations, essentially seeking approval of the transfer. In shorthand, Fino Guahana, he tried to fababa the commission by sliding this report in, recommending that they do something that everybody and his brother knew was illegal. The original applicant in the document released by the commission initially turned in his request for a residential land lease on January 5, 1996. According to the same report, more than 2 decades later, the applicant's wife signed her lease for her husband's CLTC lot in Barrigada. But the commission has previously determined the husband could not qualify. So the farther you get into it, the worse it smells. So there was nothing to transfer to the applicant's wife to begin with. Following the public revelation in February of what Haddock did, a senator suggested the governor further look into Haddock's actions. Did Haddock commit forgery by inserting his recommendation into a land agent's report against her will, and despite the commission's prior determination, what he recommended was not allowed? This was one of the questions Minority Republican Senator Joanne Brown asked. The Post has previously posed this question to the governor's office. On Tuesday, at a public event, we received an answer that Haddock still has the confidence of the governor. Now, I'm going to turn to that article. I hope. Yeah, this is an article that ran yesterday. Governor, no federal money yet. Guam now 30% vaccinated. No issues at CLTC is the headline of the article. And here's how the article ends. Finally, on the issue of CLTC Director Jack Haddock III, the governor said, I'm not up to speed with the lease, I'm not up to speed with the issue. meaning she's not familiar with it. I do know that the board has asked the chair to talk to the employees. I don't think he gave them a report yet because they did not have a quorum during their last meeting. And now here's the bombshell. I am confident that Jack did not intentionally mean anything contrary to the law and regulations of the commission.
He admitted it.
Exactly. Let me read that sentence again for emphasis. The governor said, I am confident that Jack did not intentionally mean anything contrary to the law and regulations of the commission. So he confessed in front of the commission that he'd forged the documents. And of course, everybody knew that you don't allow line skipping. And of course, he knew that the husband wasn't eligible in the first place, but he still came forward and changed that report to recommend that the commission adopt, as you were commissioned, issue a lease to the wife after the line swap. And here's what the governor said. I got to put this down on my, where's my list here of notable sayings? Yeah. Here's my list of notable sayings. Vanessa Williams, it's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. And Chief Steve Ignacio, I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in this crash. So congratulations, Governor. You made the big time here with this one-liner. I am confident that Jack did not intentionally mean anything contrary to the law and regulations of the commission. I'm not up to speed on it, but this is what I believe. And you know why she believes that, Jose? Because she wants to believe it. She wants to, I mean, he's a member of her administration. What, is she going to think ill of him? So then the governor goes on to say, we are transparent and accountable to the people. We are transparent with reports, meetings, and minutes. As far as I'm concerned, we're following everything that we're required to do. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed.
Oh, she was serious? I thought that was the punchline.
Yeah, she is serious. Now, notwithstanding what she said, I'm going to go to a story on March 29 in the Post. Vigilance Committee, stonewalling does nothing to enhance respectability of CLTC. On March 23rd, the Vigilance Committee submitted a Sunshine Act request to John Regis Jr., chairman of the Land Trust Commission, seeking the Regis report referenced in public records. In response to the Vigilance Committee request, Chairman Regis refused to disclose the Regis report, citing sections of the Sunshine Reform Act, which allows the non-disclosure of public records. Well, actually, I saw his response, and he said that he said that these kinds of records aren't even public records. But going on, then we have a quote from the president of the Vigilance Committee. Stonewalling does nothing to enhance the respectability of the CLTC. Lee Weber, president of the Vigilance Committee, said, why doesn't Commissioner Regis simply provide us the Regis report? His reluctance to disclose the Regis report leaves both land agents and the general public unsure and potentially confused, still questioning the conduct of the CLTC administrator and the entire integrity of the entire CLTC process. Weber goes on to explain, during a Chamorro Land Trust Commission meeting held in February, CLTC Administrative Director Jack Haddock admitted to altering the land agent's report without the consent of the land agent. The meeting adjourned with Commissioner Regis stating he planned to meet with agency staff and will develop a report for the commission. When asked for the Regis report, Commissioner Regis refused to disclose the report, citing an inapplicable section of the Open Government Law. because CLTC was in session and non-compliant with other sections of the open government law, Chairman Regis committed a violation. Now he refuses to disclose a report in the face of a legitimate Sunshine Act request. Commissioner Regis talks about the Regis report, yet avoids the word, quote, investigation, even when his very own director publicly admitted to altering a land agent's report. Now let's go back again to Lou's famous lines here, the governor's famous lines. I have every confidence that Jack and his dibbler as you were. That's a different article. Hang on just a second here. Yeah. Okay. So she says, yeah. Let's see. I'm not up to speed with the issue. I do know that the board has asked the chair to talk to the employees, etc. I am confident that Jack did not intentionally mean anything contrary to the law and regulations of the commission. We are transparent and accountable to the people. We are transparent with reports, meetings, and minutes. As far as I'm concerned, we're following everything that we're required to do. Yeah, as far the key words there in that whole string of sentences is, as far as I'm concerned. I don't care what Lee Weber says. I don't care what the Vigilance Committee says. I don't care what the Guam Daily Post says. As far as I'm concerned, I'm doing everything right. And all of these people who think that I'm not, my response to them is simple. Off with your heads. Yeah. So this is a fine editorial, and this is what editorial writing is all about. So let's take a break here, and I got a little bit more about the Land Trust Commission.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon is back with all your Mescla favorites, like oxtail kadu, Kahlua pig and cabbage, and Chef Peter's style black stew frittata. Mescla is ready to welcome back everyone with great service in a safe and friendly environment. Come on down and visit Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon, located on the first floor lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Open for lunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and for dinner from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call 969-2652 for reservations. Mescla, a true taste of Guam.
Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Well, I think an objective observer, is my opinion, an objective observer of what Haddock did in front of the Land Trust Commission would have been grounds enough to consider that a career-ending event. But you don't even need to fire him, for misconduct. You could fire him for incompetence. There's another article here that ran on PNC last night. Audit: CLTC commercial leases did not have formal lease agreements. The Office of Public Accountability has released the Chamorro Land Trust Commission financial statements and report on compliance and internal controls. Although the audit did not identify any significant deficiencies, it did identify material weakness in their report on internal control and compliance. According to the report, CLTC recorded coral extraction royalties of $230,000 from a construction company for mining activities on CLTC property, in which the revenue had no underlying agreements between the parties, such as the terms and conditions and rate per cubic yard extracted and verification of actual coral materials extracted. translating that down into simple English, somewhere on Chamorro Land Trust property, and I think I know where it is. I think it's up around the racetrack. There is coral that can be used for cascado, right? It's what you could use for cascado, and it is a fairly valuable resource that construction companies use it all the time. So you dig it out of the ground. You have coral, what are called coral pits, and it is a form of mining. You're mining the ground for precious metals. And apparently, the miner paid the CLTC $230,000, almost $250,000. That sounds really good. Land Trust is selling coral for $230,000. Except, maybe that would be, let's just hypothesize, maybe that would be a good price for, say, 100 tons of coral. 230 grand might be a good price. How much coral was actually mined? We don't know. So if it were 200 tons of coral, maybe it's not such a good price. So this is what the auditor said. The revenue had no underlying agreements between parties, such as the terms and conditions and rate per cubic yard extracted and verification of actual coral materials extracted. So this is the mental image that I have. Hey, Jack, we want to go mine some coral on the CLTC property. Jack says, hey, shoot. Do we need we don't need any leases, or just, pay us what you think is worth. That's not how you run a government agency, Jack. In addition, a separate letter to management cited 6 comments concerning leases, special fund revenues, leases receivable, bank accounts, lease revenues, and office lease. Specifically, commercial leases did not have formal lease agreement. It's interesting, he was so anxious to give the guy's lease to his wife, but when it comes to commercial leases, there are no formal lease agreements.
Just a handshake.
Yeah. Commercial leases did not have formal lease agreement, expired, and did not have appraisals when renewed and extended. 2 agricultural lessees held 2 separate leases in separate villages, and a residential lease was transferred without meeting the 7-year requirement per CLTC rules. No cash transfers to respective fund accounts for $226,000 in special fund revenues. Of $1.1 million in lease receivables, $543,000 were delinquent lease rental payments. In other words, of $1.1 million lease payable, more than half was not collected. 2 CLTC bank accounts are currently held in other entity names. Maybe like the Jack Haddock 3 Little League baseball team. No, I'm just kidding there. CLTC recorded $48,000 in lease revenue collections in its operations fund instead of the Survey and Infrastructure Fund as required by Public Law 34-142. The CLTC office lease did not explicitly disclose terms stipulating the commencement term of the term. So, how long would a guy last as a manager of a private company if this is what the audit showed? That swishing sound that you hear would be the door slamming behind this guy on his way out. But the governor's got every confidence in Jack. So not only was there his performance before the commission, but there's this. And we have we have another story about. There's no end to this. This one ran in the Post on today. Audit separating CLTC from other land agencies cost $81,000. Now, remember, the governor said she was separating. Let me put it. Turn back the clock. Before the Lieutenant Lulan Guerrero was sworn into office, the Department of Land Management housed the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and the Ancestral Lands Commission. And neither one of those had an independent administrator. The director of land management did all three. And when this happened, I think, during the Calvo administration. I thought this makes a lot of sense. This is reorganization, combining like entities under a single management, unity of control, etc. And land management, the CLTC, and the Ancestral Lands Commission all deal with land and land records. Where are the land records stored? The Department of Land Management. Who's in charge of the land records? The Director of Land Management. So it made good sense. But the governor came along, and I suppose this was her response to the scandal-ridden Land Trust Commission. We're separating it and the Ancestral Lands Commission from land management. Each will have its own administrator. Jack Haddock is going to be the administrator of the CLTC. The Chamorro Land Trust Commission total revenues decreased by $51,000 and spending increased by $81,000 in fiscal 2020. Another example of Jack's leadership. The OPA released audit results for the CLTC on March 30. The office also sent a letter to management citing concerns about its operations. CLTC's total revenues for October 2019 to September 2020 was $1.2 million, a reduction from the previous year, primarily due to a decrease in commercial lease rental revenues from increased delinquency in collection from tenants. Of course, we just talked about that a minute ago. They only collected half of the lease rental that was outstanding. The CLTC spending increased from $944,000 in fiscal 2019 to $1 million in fiscal 2020. This is mainly due to the increase of CLTC operational costs of reestablishing the CLTC as a separate agency from the Department of Land Management and reestablishing its administrative director position. Independent auditors from Deloitte outlined control deficiencies, which we just talked about, etc. A certain lease was transferred to a current listed lessee effective June 2019. However, the previous lessee held the lease for less, I already talked about that in the other release. So it cost, let's see, we're paying Jack $107,000 according to the other story. So that was the expense of separating the CLTC off. So the attention paid to it by its administrator would be increased, and the performance of the trust would be enhanced. Yeah. And what a disaster. What a disaster.
It's a philosophy of this government right now.
Yeah.
Just ignore what's going on and just keep nodding heads.
Yeah. And let it go. The governor is sure that Jack has done nothing wrong.
And extending the health emergency, which extends executive powers. I'm venting here.
Well, you should. And while we're talking about this, 36 Guam legislature, since she took it upon herself to extend the emergency, when all of her actions seem to indicate that the emergency is close to being over, whatever happened to the Bob and Ray resolution? You could put an end to this foolishness right now. And as far as Clint is concerned, you're right, Clint, they could do that. But what Chris proposed in his Bill 11 is actually softer. It doesn't end the governor's magic powers. It just says, Governor, you have to explain to us why you need to keep extending these declarations of emergency. We're not, we're not stupid. We can hear, we can understand. We want things to work, but you can't be doing this all by yourself. So hello, 36 Guam Earth to 36 Guam legislature. Can you hear me? All right. So that's that's Demi Cotney for today. And I mentioned that there was a lot to the Post editorial and Daily News. Kaleo Moylan, if you're listening, that's what a real editorial looks like. That's how a real editorial sounds. There were no softballs. That wasn't an editorial designed for the softball league. It was hard-hitting. It was punchy. It told a story that needed to be told, and it held people accountable. It began the process of holding Jack Haddock accountable. The next venture here is to hold William Regis Jr. accountable for his stonewalling and for apparently tolerating this. So, at the time that Haddock put on his show, the Jack Haddock Show, the Jack Haddock 3 Show, Regis adjourned the meeting. They didn't entertain any other business. And then at the next meeting, a couple of commissioners apparently got cold feet because they didn't show up. So Regis and the rest of you commissioners, if you can't do the job, turn in your resignation. Governor, appoint people who will do the job. The Land Trust Commission has been nothing but a scandal, going all the way back to the last members, and it's taken off in the same direction. And if you look at the organic statute, you want to be on the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, you got to be a United States citizen, right? No criminal. You got to be Chamorro. You want to be the administrator of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, you got to be Chamorro. And up until the settlement in the court case, you wanted a lease from the Land Trust Commission, you got to be Chamorro. This is perhaps not totally fair, but take a look at the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, all of you separatists, and ask yourself, is this the model that you'll establish?
Yikes.
Once Guam becomes an independent country? Yeah. That's not totally fair. It's completely fair to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and to William or to John Regis Jr. Usually we think in terms of putting the best and brightest and most honest people on these boards and commissions. Notice I prefaced my remarks with the words usually. All right, let's take a short break here, and I'll come back to the card.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Sunday brunch at Mezcla Bistro in Hagåtña is back.
Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam.
At only $28.95, enjoy your Sunday with your friends and family with their free-flowing house mimosa or house draft beer. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m.
Let Mezcla serve up your favorite local foods. Call them at 479-2652
or 479-2653 to book a reservation. Limited seating available.
Mezcla reminds everyone to be safe and stay sanitized. Sunday brunch at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Yeah, I'm just looking at your post here, Jose, and dividing these governmental entities seems there was a sole interest in creating appointed director positions. Well, you remember right after the governor came on board, she had appointment fever.
Blah.
Yeah,
even resurrecting dead committees and
yeah, she resurrected the Bureau of Women's Affairs. She resurrected the Agania Redevelopment Authority. This allowed her to appoint 2 more people. She split land trust and ancestral lands from land management, 2 more people. Yeah. And of course, conventional wisdom holds that when you do this for people, they become very loyal, politically very loyal to you. So when you run for re-election, they know that they could contribute $2,000 to you, $1,000 for each election. They know that. They understand that. No one has to come along and twist their arms. They already know that. And they know that if they want to hang on to their jobs, then their interest is in seeing the governor reelected. The so-called Hatch Act doesn't apply to people appointed and confirmed by the legislature. That's right. Now, that's not Jack. But people appointed in, like the chief of police, the Hatch Act doesn't apply to him. He's appointed and confirmed. So there's nothing to stop these people from going out and campaigning for the governor's reelection. A valuable asset. Now, people like Haddock and Cassill and Flores would also have value. They just got to be a little bit more careful how they do their campaigning. So we're seeing in the Land Trust Commission and Jack Haddock and the governor's treatment of him the worst of what used to be called the spoils system.
Kid gloves.
The spoils system. As Andrew Jackson once said, Andrew Jackson, upon being elected president, got rid of all of John Quincy Adams, everybody from John Quincy Adams' administration that he could, and appointed his own folks. And when he was criticized for that, you're getting rid of competent people. What are you doing, President Jackson? Andrew Jackson says, to the victors belong the spoils. That's where the spoil system came from. Lou Longuerrero won the election. To the victor go the spoils. Okay, first item, of course, on the card, Steve Ignacio. And today, Steve has distinguished himself, in the words of the immortal real Joe Cruz, not by what he did, not by what he said, but by what he didn't say. Yesterday's Post ran a story, cop spends weekend in prison for drunken driving. Now, you would expect any self-respecting chief of police would have called a news conference to tell you what he had done, what he was going to do. What did Steve Ignacio do? Nothing. And we know from studying the background of the story, the drunken driving incident occurred on July 4th, 2018. The cop involved here pled guilty on January 20th of 2020, which would have been a time for Steve to fire him right then. And then he's sentenced, and then he goes to jail, and Steve could still fire him. What has Steve said about this whole thing? You got that. Run that quote again, Jose. It's amazing how Steve is kind of like Dr. Doolittle. He can talk to the crickets. All right. So the next thing on the card here is Grijalva versus the Insular cases. And this one's a little long and a little involved, but if you stick with me, you will know what the Insular cases really are about. And I have a tip for all of those folks out there that like to talk about the Insular cases. The best way to understand the Insular cases is not to pick up on the quotes from Neil Weir and the other demagogues who are out there with nonprofits trying to raise funds. The best way to find out what the insular cases say is to read them. Now, the one that everyone pays the most attention to is called Downs versus Bidwell. And I've talked about Downs versus Bidwell before. Downs was importing oranges from Puerto Rico into New York. Bidwell was the collector of customs in New York, and he wanted to charge customs duty on those oranges. It was a little more complicated than that. Downs said, no, you can't do that. He was able to bring suit in federal court. The case found its way to the Supreme Court. And that's where this quote that everybody loves, just loves, appears in Downs versus Bidwell. And I'll show you how it appears. The other really important case was a case called DeLima versus Bidwell. This time it wasn't oranges, it was bananas. And DeLima Downs wanted to charge DeLima customs duty because the bananas came from a foreign country, Puerto Rico. And the Supreme Court said, no, Puerto Rico is not a foreign country. You can't charge those duties. Depending on how you count them up, there are probably close to 24 insular cases. You don't need to read them all. You need to read Downs. You need to read DeLima. You probably should read Balzac versus Puerto Rico. That is if you have this strange desire to know what you're talking about, a desire which doesn't seem to affect a lot of people who want to jump into this game. Balzac versus Puerto Rico is the case that really established the doctrine of selective incorporation. Downs hinted at it. Balzac formalized it. Balzac also said that there is nothing unconstitutional about granting United States citizenship to someone who lives in an island territory that is not bound for statehood. Before that time, well, let's back up a second here. The status of conquered territory is determined in one of two ways. The provisions of the treaty by which the United States gathered the territory, and the second way is by an act of Congress. Now, I'm going to come back to this right after the big halftime show. Make sure you got your Law and Order notebooks when we come back after the halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Allegations of sex trafficking against a congressman. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz denies reports he engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a 17-year-old girl. He tells Fox News,
"What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. On March 16th, my father got a text message demanding a meeting wherein a person demanded $25 million in exchange for making horrible sex trafficking allegations against me go away."
Appearing on the Tucker Carlson show, Gaetz says he's the victim of organized crime extortion. G. Gordon Liddy, the mastermind behind the Watergate burglary that led to the downfall of President Nixon, has died at age 90. His son confirmed the death without providing the cause. In this 1990 interview with the TV show A Current Affair, Liddy talks about being considered a bad guy.
After I'd got out of prison, the New York City Police Department inducted me into the Honor Legion. I was invited up and addressed the cadets at West Point, was given a case officer's sword and what have you. It all depends upon your point of view.
Liddy was convicted of conspiracy, burglary, and wiretapping and served 52 months in prison. Emotional testimony given Tuesday during the trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin.
The witness, a minor who recorded the widely seen video of Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck, told prosecutors Chauvin maintained pressure even after EMS arrived.
His knee was still there, even when they came, even at the end, even unresponsive.
Defense attorney Eric Nelson sought to establish that the recording only captured George Floyd on the ground, not what led to it.
Fox's Gernal Scott. America's listening to Fox News.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon is back with all your mezcla favorites, like oxtail cadu, Kahlua pig and cabbage, and Chef Peter's style black stew frittata. Mezcla is ready to welcome back everyone with great service in a safe and friendly environment. Come on down and visit Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Tumon, located on the first floor lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Open for lunch from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and for dinner from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call 969-2652 for reservations. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
The vaccine is officially here, and we aren't just talking about the COVID vaccine, but a financial vaccine at Bank Pacific. We may not be doctors, but we can help you with your financial health. Whether to take advantage of today's crazy low rates, or just a local bank that has your back. At Bank Pacific, we want to help make 2021 your best year yet. Because for 66 years, where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Equal housing lender, member FDIC.
A report claims New York Governor Cuomo's administration largely ignored pleas for COVID tests for nursing homes last spring, allegedly secured the scarce test for his relatives.
The Washington Post reports new details alleging the governor prioritized COVID-19 tests for his VIP friends and family. More than 100 people received priority testing, including clothing designer Kenneth Cole, the governor's brother-in-law, while a top state physician whose job was to coordinate testing in nursing homes made multiple visits to test the governor's brother, CNN anchor Chris Cuomo, at his home in the Hamptons.
Fox's Brian Yennis. The governor's office denies any VIP testing program existed. Russia says it's registered the world's first COVID vaccine for animals. It's called Carnivac Cove. A billionaire fills the last two seats on a private flight set to go into orbit later this year.
Two were made available to the public via a raffle, with all the money being donated to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital in Memphis. The flight is being paid for by billionaire software magnate Jared Isaacman. He's flying in one seat, and he selected St. Jude physician assistant Haley Arsenault. And now two raffle winners, community college teacher Cyan Proctor from Tempe and retired U.S. Airman Chris Sembrowski from Washington State. The Dragon capsule will not visit the International Space Station, and so instead of the docking mechanism, it will be fitted with a viewing dome. Eben Brown, Fox News.
And a U.S. district judge sentences the brother of Honduras' president to life in prison for drug trafficking. Evidence in the trial in New York City showed Antonio Hernandez smuggled about 185 tons of cocaine into the U.S. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon, or call 646-1463.
Chili's is bringing you a full meal offer with 3 for Me for just $15. You get a beverage, a starter, and an entree. First, choose from a refreshing Coca-Cola or iced tea, pick a starter, then select your choice of a mouth-watering entree, like Cajun pasta with grilled chicken, ranchero chicken tacos, or the savory Santa Fe burger. Dine in today or visit chilisguam.com for delivery and to-go options. Chili's, 3 for Me for just $15. Available for a limited time. Chili's, savor the moment.
Hey, big
news. Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Halftime show here on Tall Tales. They just get better and better every week, today being no exception. So we go from the halftime show to Puerto Rico because we're talking about the insular cases. And once again, little history lesson here. You'll know that in 1898, the United States apparently provoked by the sinking of an American battleship, the battleship Maine, in Havana Harbor by Cuban officials, declared war on Spain. And as a result of the war, the United States took Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam as prizes of war. The United States became an imperial nation, notwithstanding a distinct distaste for imperialism at the beginning of the country. Fellows like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were not imperialists. But the United States, I suppose, by 1898, figured, the Japanese have started their imperial empire. Everybody knew that the sun never sets on the British Empire. The Belgians had the Congo. The Dutch had Indonesia and lots of islands in the Caribbean. The French had African and Caribbean colonies, not to mention Vietnam and Southeast Asia. So I suppose there was this feeling among some Americans, hey, we ought to have our own colonies too. This was not a unanimous sentiment, and if you go back and read what was going on after the Spanish-American War around the turn of the century, there was an extremely strong anti-imperialist factor in the country. The imperialists were led by President William McKinley, followed up by that great progressive. Progressives are always in favor of all of the really good stuff. Great progressive, Teddy Roosevelt, when asked about the United States and the Panama Canal, was heard to say, when he was accused of imperialism, when the United States built the Panama Canal. I remember one cartoon in a newspaper, not from that time, but I remember seeing it. Teddy Roosevelt's got a shovel in his hand, and he's digging dirt out of the Panama Canal and throwing it over his shoulder on Colombia. Because the United States literally stole Panama from Colombia. Yeah, American factors fomented a Panamanian revolution. Panama seceded from Colombia, and within a matter of days, Panama signed the Canal Treaty with the United States. So when Teddy Roosevelt was accused of imperialism and stealing and taking that canal, he said, hey, wait a minute, I stole it fair and square. So, progressives always take the high road. Well, he was as much of an imperialist as the rest. So then the question became, well, how do we deal with our new colonial empire, because the Constitution really wasn't designed around the concept of imperialism. It was jury-rigged to fit. Okay, now I'm going to go back to this article here that it ran in the Post, and I'm going to pick it up from there, and by the time I'm done, you'll know everything there is to know about the insular cases, but didn't know who to ask. Congressional resolution seeks end to use of racist, unconstitutional insular cases. Now, first thing is no. Although nowadays, if you don't use the word racist, no one will pay any attention to you. They're not. And how can a case that was decided by the Supreme Court that has not been overruled be unconstitutional? Early 20th century U.S. Supreme Court decisions known as the insular cases used deeply offensive language such as people with an uncivilized race and savage and restless people when talking about those living in U.S. territories such as Guam. Some members of the U.S. House of Representatives said they don't know what they're talking about. The insular cases run contrary to the text and history of the Constitution and therefore should not be used in present and future cases, the congressional member said. So if they're saying that, maybe they could do something about it. Somehow passing resolutions in Congress, resolutions passed by Congress don't come before the Supreme Court. House Natural Resources Committee Chairman Raut M. Grijalva, Democrat of Arizona, along with 7 other members on Friday, introduced a resolution calling on the courts, the U.S. Department of Justice, and other litigants to reject any continued reliance on the insular cases. Grijalva said the legacy of the insular cases continues to threaten the rights and interests of Americans living in the territories. H.R. 279 is co-sponsored by Guam delegate Michael San Nicolas and Northern Marianas delegate Gregorio Kilili Sablan and 5 others. Michael, shame on you. I didn't expect this from you. And then another quote, these last vestiges of blatant racism and governance and interpretation of the law used today to validate an equal treatment of Americans in the territories are staring us in the face, daring us to bring them down. The question of our time is, will we blink? San Nicolas said. Bad, Michael, bad, bad, bad. Sablan said the insular cases decided in 1901 by the same Supreme Court that upheld segregation laws have no place in modern-day America. Well, the insular case decided in 1901 that he's talking about is the one I just mentioned, Downs versus Bidwell. In these cases, Sablan said the Supreme Court calls people living in the territories alien and savage and restless people. You must have read that in one of Neil Mear's press releases, Kalili. These are antiquated notions of racial inferiority that should not be the basis of any contemporary court decisions. Our resolution recognizes these racist and imperialist assumptions for what they are. It rejects the insular cases and affirms the importance of equal rights for Americans everywhere, even in the U.S. insular areas, Sablan said in a statement undoubtedly written by, his scrivener. Grijalva said the committee's plan to host a legislative hearing in May on the resolution. The resolution argues that these cases rely on a racist, Plessy-era doctrine of separate and unequal. No, just wrong, dead wrong, to establish a relationship between the United States and territories. He said part of this legacy is evident in the continued exclusion of U.S. citizens living in territories from essential federal programs and benefits, an exclusion that multiple federal courts have questioned in the recent years. And he talks about United States versus Vallero, Madero, which is an SSI case, Schaller versus Social Security Administration, which is a Guam SSI case, Pena Martinez versus Health and Social Services, which a federal court declared unconstitutional, not just the Puerto Rican exclusion of Puerto Rican residents, but also their exclusion from SNAP benefits. Okay, so the teaching point here, the teachable moment is, regardless of what you think, the courts are open to the people that live in the territories. Now, I want to go from there to something that causes me to do my Rush Limbaugh interpretation. And you know how that one goes, Jose.
You don't like to talk about yourself.
Yeah, I don't, Jose, I don't like to talk about myself here on the show, but this time I have to, because this is about me. Okay, now I start out with an editorial that ran in the Daily News in, I think, 2018. This is the Pacific Daily News. This is back in the days when the Daily News actually had local editorials, believe it or not. Our view, time for territories to have full voting rights. Hooray for the Daily News. Earlier this week, the United States Supreme Court decided not to review a lower court's decision in Segovia versus United States, a voting rights case involving residents of territories. I went through that at some length. It deals with UCAVA, a Uniform Overseas Veterans, Servicemen and Civilian Voting Rights Act. And the problem with UCAVA is it doesn't treat Guam like a foreign country. But I went through that before. No need to go through it before. It really doesn't address the question head on. It addresses the question about people who lived in the 50 states and moved to foreign countries. Okay, the lawsuit was filed by Equal American, a group headed by civil rights attorney and former Guam resident Neil Weir. In this case, the group represents veterans and others living in Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands who would be able to vote for president by absentee ballot from Illinois if they lived in other territories or in foreign countries. They don't treat Guam like a foreign country. Bad. The group should be applauded for its efforts to establish voting rights for the territories. But voting rights to be meaningful, they should be granted to all eligible adult citizens residing in the territories, much like the 23rd Amendment grants voting rights to citizens residing in the District of Columbia. Well, there you go. You amend the Constitution. D.C. residents who vote for president are represented by electors in the Electoral College. Guam residents who cast ballots for presidents have no such representation. You got that right. The right to cast a meaningful vote should not be limited to military veterans or those who have lived in other states. In August 2016, a federal judge ruled that former Illinois residents in the Segovia case did not have the right to cast absentee ballots in that state. The judge said there is no fundamental right to vote in the territories. I would take that a little farther. There's no fundamental right to vote anywhere, but that's another program. The judge said there's no fundamental right to vote in the territory, citing U.S. Supreme Court's decisions from 1901 called the insular cases. In one of those cases, Downs versus Bidwell, the Supreme Court stated, if those possessions are inhabited by, and I want you to remember that word if, that comes back. If those possessions are inhabited by alien races differing from us in religion, customs, laws, methods of taxation, and modes of thought, the administration of government and justice according to Anglo-Saxon principles may for a time be impossible. What was the first word of that quote?
If.
Yeah. In one of those cases, as you were given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights continue to be denied based on the insular cases. I guess the author of this editorial didn't take ninth grade civics. It's time for citizens in the territories to be able to vote for president, not through an absentee ballot in a state, but in our own communities, which have been part of the United States for over 100 years. That's what the Daily News wrote, okay? Yeah. Well, this is the part where I got to talk. This is about me. So a couple days later, a letter to the editor ran in the Daily News. And it's titled, Klitzkie, PDN editorial wrong about insular cases, voting rights. Now, Michael, I guess you weren't reading the Daily News back in those days. In response to a Pacific Daily News editorial from October 12, the punchline from a TV comedy show is a rather shallow foundation upon which to build an editorial dealing with a serious subject. The glaringly false statement was uttered by Guam, quote, historian, unquote, Ann Parasittori on the TV show called Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah, it's some comedy show.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And Ann Parasittori there was actually a voiceover from her. And this is what she said. The United States flag is flying over these islands. So some people said, well, doesn't that mean that American laws apply? In 1901, the insular case is basically the judgment of the Supreme Court. The new territories were inhabited by alien races, and they may not be able to understand Anglo-Saxon laws. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't have to apply. Now, this is someone who holds herself out as a historian at the university. And a little backstory here, this was maybe a couple months after Robert Underwood, who was the president, distinguished academic freedom from freedom of speech. And Robert pointed out that freedom of speech, pretty understandable. Academic freedom means you are free to speak out, but what you say must be truthful and accurate. This is not truthful and accurate. Obviously made following the Talina Nelson principle of not ever, she doesn't have Downs versus Bidwell in her office. She never read it. So when this came out, without going too deeply into the context, I wrote a long letter laying all this stuff out to Robert Underwood, reminding him of his column and academic freedom. I said, this is not academic freedom. This is just false. And Robert Underwood never came back and addressed my points. So I got to look into that a little bit. But then he repeated the same thing during his campaign. The racist lingo and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Just look at that title.
Yeah.
Of the show.
All right. So once again, Ann Parasittori, the United States flag is flying over these islands. So some people said, well, doesn't that mean American laws apply? In 1901, the insular cases, basically the judgment of the Supreme Court, the new territories were inhabited by alien races, and they may not be able to understand Anglo-Saxon laws. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't have to apply. Just dead wrong. So my letter goes on to say, Hattori, a Guam historian, condensed 147 pages of United States Supreme Court opinion into 38 words and presented that the 38-word quote as the ratio decidendi, the reason or rationale, and not the hypothetical obiter dictum that it really was. The three concurring opinions from which the court's ruling was derived employed different rationales, which yielded the holding in Downs, none of which relied on Guam historian Hattori's 38 words to reach a result. Hattori's statement smacks of a degree of sophistry that is perhaps fitting for a TV comic, but not coming from a university professor who we should be able to take seriously. The other key case, S.B. Downs and Company, was an importer who sued the collector of customs for New York to recover $659.35 paid in duty for the import of some bananas to George R. Bidwell, the customs collector for New York. Downs turned on the determination of whether the Foraker Act, which is Puerto Rico's Organic Act, passed constitutional muster. The Downs decision held only that the uniformity clause of the Constitution, you've heard me mention that before, the uniformity clause, which reads like this: the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. That's the uniformity clause. So Downs versus Bidwell held that that clause was not applicable outside the 47 states that made up the Union at that time. That's what it's about. It's a case that deals with commerce. Bananas, oranges, sugar. Without, if you go into the economic history of that time, you realize that sugar was raised in Puerto Rico. Sugar was raised in the Philippines. There were pineapple. I mean, this was a really important case, not because of alien races, but what could be brought into the United States under various tariff programs. So here's the real holding of the case, and parasitory. We are therefore of the opinion that the island of Puerto Rico is a territory appurtenant and belonging to the United States, but not a part of the United States within the revenue clauses of the Constitution. Not a part of the United States within the revenue clauses of the Constitution. That the Foraker Act is constitutional so far as it imposes duties upon imports from such island, and that plaintiff cannot recover back the duties exacted in this case. That's what the case held. Downs dealt with customs duties, not voting, and not with the inapplicability of the Constitution in Puerto Rico and other places due to the presence of alien races. The alien races wordage is obiter dictum, doesn't apply to Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Philippines, or Guam, and is stated only hypothetically. Inability of residents of the territories does not stem from the insular cases. Inability of territory residents of territories to vote does not stem from the design of the cases, but from the design of the American Republic, where civil rights have a national dimension, but political rights arise from residents in one of the 50 states. Voting in national elections is not unavailable because of the insular cases. The Pacific Daily News statement, quote, given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights continue to be denied on the insular cases, is not only dead wrong, but is very similar to arguments that attempt to gaslight Guam's position in the American system in order to enhance argument for Guam that is independent of the United States. Numerous myths sounding in identity politics, such as, we are second-class citizens, we're statutory, not constitutional citizens, because of the insular cases, we can't vote for president. There are only 3 options for decolonization of the island, and Gov Guam is working toward decolonization, and the one that you just published, Daily News, given the clearly racist language and logic, it's disturbing that voting rights continue to be denied based on the insular cases continue to circulate. This is a crucial time in the political development of Guam, given that we live in a time when serious discussions concerning nationalism, statehood, self-determination, patriotism, national defense, self-government, racism, decolonization, home rule, hegemony, etc., require serious discussions. None of us is well served by mythic distractions grounded in identity politics. I have higher hopes for the Daily News, which obviously have not been met. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a second, but I've got a break for the seventh inning stretch. But I do know, and I've got more to say about this. I can prove up for sure what I'm saying about the alien races language simply by reading Downs versus Bidwell. So I notice I've got another Joe on the line, and I've got Dr. Ron McNinch on the line. So yesterday, or Wednesday, let's see, Monday, I had to wave off Dr. Ron McNinch because he wanted to talk about the Georgia statute, and I wasn't finished with Melvin Wanpat. So even though another Joe apparently called in first and wants to talk about the term savages, I'm going to let Ron McNinch go first because he's kind of got a rain check from the time he called in before. So, Ron, I'm going to collect your rain check and escort you to the second to the center field bleachers right after we do the seventh inning stretch. Go ahead, Jose.
Very good.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Sunday brunch at Mezcla Bistro in Hagåtña is back.
Come and enjoy Mezcla's true taste of Guam.
At only $28.95, enjoy your Sunday with your friends and family with their free-flowing house mimosa or house draft beer. Open for 2 seatings at 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m.
Let Mezcla serve up your favorite local foods. Call them at 479-2652
or 479-2653 to book a reservation. Limited seating available.
Mezcla reminds everyone to be safe and stay sanitized. Sunday brunch at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
So here I am strolling around Wrigley Field, and I walk out to the front gate, and I see this gentleman from Georgia who bears a striking resemblance to Ty Cobb standing there waving a rain check at me. And I say, come on in, Ron, I'll take you up to the center field bleachers.
Hey, Happy Cinder, Happy Guam.
Do you want to sit down in the center field bleachers, or you want to say half a day to Guam?
Well, how about both? And, Cinder, we did talk about the Georgia law very briefly, the other day. And I have to say, I have a couple of friends in the Georgia legislature today, and I read the Georgia law, and there's really not a lot of things that really should be all that controversial about the Georgia law. Now, I know they've made a big deal about, you can't give people water while they're waiting in line. Well, I think it's a very long-standing rule. Even on Guam, we don't let political actors go up and give their fiesta food to the voters as they're going into the voting lines. They come out and they go to the tents to get their food. And if people want
You're absolutely right, Ron. And unfortunately, I'm going to do it to you again because when I finish with the insular cases, the next item on the card is the Washington Post gives Biden 4 Pinocchios for statement on new Georgia election law. So even the WAPO recognized it. But let's go back to Puerto Rico and the insular cases.
Right. I got a couple of things to say about the insular cases. One of the key things, and people cherry pick the insular cases, and that's one thing I absolutely hate quite often when people make arguments on fairly straightforward legal concepts or even constitutional concepts, is they'll cherry pick a line or a phrase or two here or there and then act as if that's all that matters.
That's what we got right here, right here.
Right. And so I think that quite often, and in their defense, these folks aren't lawyers, they're not legal scholars or anything else.
Well, one of them was a historian, and I hold historians to, if you want to write about the law, historian, then you better read the law before you start writing. But go on, Ron.
Point. But I do believe also that quite often what happens is people, I don't want to say they repeat the lack of facts over and over again to the point where they believe it's truth. But what happens is once people hear it and they don't check the source and then they believe it and then they repeat it, and then it's like that little game where people whisper a word on one end of a room and then by the other end of the room it's something entirely different. And so instead of relying on the real source and relying on, the real logic and structure of the argument is presented in like a Supreme Court case, people are making up quasi-factual opinions in their own view of what a fact is and then repeating them over and over again, and then they believe it's truth. And I think that's a little bit of the case here.
Well, what you have is a situation where I've heard this racist thing so many times, and I ask, how do you know that? Well, I read it in the Daily News, or I read it in the, and to me, it's kind of like the snakes on Guam. Some zoologist came out here and marked off 1 square yard, and he found 3 snakes in that yard, and then he multiplied 3 snakes by the number of square yards on the whole island. And that somehow made the New York Times. And now everybody knows that Guam is just completely overrun with snakes, when as a fact, I haven't seen even a dead snake for a couple of years. But it's the same phenomenon, Ron.
Yes. One other quick thing I was going to mention, and this is one thing that always bothers me along these same lines. Everyone loves to talk about the United Nations and the role of the United Nations for Guam. Our game, if we're talking about improving our government or our internal government or our political relations with the United States, the game is played with the U.S. Congress, not the United Nations. So if we really want to have any real meaningful change at all on Guam, we have to learn how to work with the Congress better. And that's what Article 4 says. You work with the Congress. That's what the Organic Act says. You work with the Congress. But even in our own local law, we said, political status is independence, free association, or statehood. That's not really what the United Nations says. It says free association, independence, or integration with another country. But then there's a fourth status that nobody ever talks about. And the fourth status is make whatever deal you want to with the person or with the country that you fall under. And actually, that's the status quo plus option, and nobody ever talks about it. And yet, that's one of the 4 options. There's not just 3 options. And yet, people keep repeating over and over and over again, there's only 3 options, but there's not. And even the 3 options that they've put forward don't even fit the United Nations criterion, because integration is not simply statehood. It's a lot of other things. So it's just people repeating the same junk over and over again and not checking their facts.
Isn't it a miracle that we have tall tales to set people straight on these things, Ron?
But the odd thing is, heavily criticized every time I mention there's a 4th status, and it's right there in the United Nations decolonization website. They made it so simple, they even made a moving cartoon out of it, that there are 4 statuses, just to make the point perfectly clear. It's just incredible that I think it's because it does not fit the narrative that some want the narrative to say.
Of course not. And Ron, when you come up with radical ideas like this 4th option, you are running the risk of being canceled, because that doesn't fit into the critical race theory.
Well, luckily I do have tenure, and luckily this is within the scope of my academic field. So hopefully, if that's the safeguard, then hopefully that's the safeguard. Because I think in general, it's very simple to check these things. Also, Senator, it's not even hard with the internet. Back 30 or 40 years ago, a person would actually have to go to a library and get the right book at the right time. Today, it is extremely easy for any person to check what I've just said to everyone. It's not hard at all.
You could type in Downs versus Bidwell, and you could be reading the case in literally in a minute.
Yes, and in fact, we go over Downs versus Bidwell and the Powell case and other cases like that every year or sometimes every semester, and we go over the meaning or the basic context. I encourage everyone to actually read what was written, not what people say about what was written.
And that, of course, is always a good rule. And back to Ann Parasatori, that's what we expect. We don't expect historians, people to call themselves historians because they've read a lot of history books. We call them historians because they've gone back to source documents and developed their historiography from source documents, not what somebody else said.
Well, I have to say, I like Ann. Ann's a friend of mine, but I don't always agree with what people say. And I think that, sir, that's an important point, and you've made it on your show quite often too. People don't always agree, and actually having a discussion where people disagree is a lot more fun than where people agree all the time. But I have to say, in these particular instances, the people who want to agree do want to cancel, they do want to shut down, and they do want to shout out or shout down anybody who has a contrary opinion to theirs, which is unfortunate.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. And as far as, arguments, the differences of opinion, et cetera, we have an ironclad rule here on Tall Tales. If a caller expresses something that I disagree with, I will take the time to correct him and show him where he's wrong. And from then on, I protect his right to be wrong on Tall Tales.
But also, you provide a venue for people to discuss and debate things, which I find very refreshing. I think that's really what free speech is about. That's really what freedom of the press is about. It's about the ability for people to have clashing or contrary opinions. It's so funny. If you look at a lot of schools in the U.S. mainland, there are whole groups of college professors who are scared to death to say any wrong thing to offend any wrong group of students because you're going to hurt their feelings.
Absolutely.
And it's just terrible. And there's a very good book by Dr. John Haidt called The Coddling of America, how we've raised a generation of overly sensitive young people who can't understand what criticism is or can't understand what alternative ideas are without overreacting to it.
Those people should be forced to listen to Tall Tales every day, Ron. Thanks a lot for calling. I gotta head for Churchill Downs, but good talking to you again.
I love your show, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Hafa, this is Josh here at APL. Our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit www.apo.com.
So I caught a fast train from downtown Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky. That's about, what, 350, 375 miles, I guess. I don't think you could get there on a train anymore, but there was a time when you could. And when I pulled into Louisville, Kentucky, I headed straight for Churchill Downs. And when I got inside the grandstand, who did I run into? None other than Another Joe. Are you ready for the race, Another Joe, for the home stretch?
I hope so, Kebab. How's everything? I think you answered my question during the commentary that it's antiquated. And also was not completely explained. I don't know, even to the old perception of the concept of being savage, cultures or races or whatever. Yeah, I think antiquated sounds like the explanation. And,
well, not antiquated, non-existent. You know, that is not the basis for the decision in Downs versus Bidwell. Even Grijaldo made one. You know, there's no reference to savage races anywhere in Downs. So Ron made the point. You know, Congress is the avenue that we need to. But if you got morons like this guy Raul Grijalvo in the Congress, I don't know. I don't hold out a whole lot of hope. He thinks he's going to pass a resolution and change the precedent from the Supreme Court, and then he goes into it dead wrong. So anyhow, what were you going to say, Another Joe?
Yeah, I don't even know if it serves for the optics, but I think I have to agree with Professor, previous caller, Professor Ron McMinch's fourth was the option, status quo plus. That I'm for that. I'm for status quo plus. But whenever I mentioned it to anyone, they say, "Oh no, it can't be status quo." I'm like, why not? There's precedent for it. It's status quo. But you know, like you said, you can make whatever deal you want with the Congress. But I mean, take a look at the CNMI. They made this deal for, was it Social Security? And we're scratching our heads saying exactly what, you know, I guess that the contemporary, at the time, the contemporary lawmakers in Congress could see the value of having a solid archipelago front under the U.S. system. So yeah, I like the idea of status quo plus, and we adapt to the interests of the jurisdiction and see where that goes. But I think this, like Ramanich said, you know, this is a good value in listening to this program and listening to the legal terms and concepts, and to learn the way the game's played. You know, Kebab, I don't know why, but it makes me think of that movie John Wick, where he's going around and he's a hitman, and the only option he has is to defend himself by taking out other hitmen. And so the title of I don't know, it was the most recent movie is Parabellum, to have peace, prepare for war. In the movie, the guy who seems to be a mentor of John Wick, assisting him, there's a certain commentary or line that they bring us. You are going against the rules. No, I understand. It's a parley. In other words, it's positioning for a stronger position. I'm sorry, it's. I'm not articulate and expressing this about me. You can explain it better, but holding out for a better position maybe is a better way of saying it. And I just think that these local people, so-called local interests, they're either really clumsy about it, really stupid about it, or they just, like you said, they're not putting in their due diligence. You know, they're not reading what they need to read. They're not putting some thought into it, and they're not having a dialogue and meeting of the minds to determine what is the best option. They're just repeating themselves over and over as though...
You know, worse than that, another Joe, I think what they have done is they have developed their narrative. And the narrative doesn't have to be historically correct, legally correct, or any other kind of correct. It just has to be their narrative. And those who will sign on for their narrative are good people, and those who don't, they're not so good. And that's where we are. And this is a classic example, this Ann Hattori repeating this legal fiction over and over again. So another Joe, I'm going to get back into this, and I don't know if I can finish it up today, but if I can, I'll finish it tomorrow, okay?
Okay. Well, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for calling, yeah.
Can I ask a real quick question, Bob?
Yeah.
Now, the insular cases describe a set of rulings of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So what exactly is being sought here? A reversal of the rulings? Can that be done by the legislature?
Hell no.
Then what is it they're looking for?
Well, and that would be the second part of the discussion. Let's say that we do have the proper vehicle to get before the U.S. Supreme Court, and we challenge the insular cases and say that you read the Constitution wrong. Key word here is exproprio vigere of its own force. Does the Constitution apply to the prizes of war exproprio vigere of its own force? And the answer to that question is no. Okay, and that's the foundation of the insular cases. That's why that uniformity clause doesn't have to apply. So if the right vehicle came along and the right arguments were made and the Supreme Court said Downs was wrong, the Constitution of the United States applies to Guam and Puerto Rico exproprio vigere of its own force, you know what happens? Guam becomes an incorporated territory. No more mirror image U.S. income tax. No more duty-free ports. Everything else is pretty much the same. So we're absolutely no better. We're much better off where we are than where we were. Hawaii was an incorporated territory. They didn't even get to elect their own governor. Hawaii never elected the governor until it was a state. Hawaii paid income tax from 1916 on,
They didn't become a state till 1959.
That's right, but they paid U.S. income tax. People living in Hawaii were subject to the draft during World War II and on and on and on. So, and you know, people don't, are conditioned not to listen to this, but being an unincorporated territory is an extremely favorable political status because Guam is a duty-free port. We have our own customs collectors at the port. We have this incredible tax break where we get to keep all of the federal income tax that's paid here, plus the income tax of any serviceman that's stationed here. We're entitled to an abundance of federal programs, notwithstanding the fact that we don't put a nickel in the United States Treasury. So this is a deal beyond anything else. And here, because of a lucky break, we can even create tax holidays on the income tax with a gated qualifying certificate. No place else under the American flag can you do that. So we've really got a great situation here, and it would all be gone if for some reason the Supreme Court took it upon itself or upon the urging of Neil Weir to overturn the insular cases. It would be hell on earth, because if we had to pay income tax to the feds, that means we'd have to raise the money to support our own government here. We couldn't do it. No. Yeah, but of course this doesn't fit the narrative, so it's obviously not a really good idea. So I want to go back here. I'm probably not going to be able to finish this today, but this is in my humble estimation, this is extremely important. And it's something that there is so much information and so many people peddling the information that it's really unfortunate. For instance, and I go back here to my letter to the editor, here's what Ann Parasitore said on John Oliver's TV program. The United States flag is flying over these lands, so some people said, well, doesn't that mean that American laws apply? In 1901, the Insular cases, basically the judgment of the Supreme Court, the new territories were inhabited by alien, quote, alien races, and they may not be able to understand Anglo-Saxon laws. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't have to apply. This is a university professor. And you know, that's what I was talking about to Ron, that people would tell me that the Insular cases are racist. Well, how do you know that? Well, I read it in the Daily News, or, you know, that John Oliver program. I saw it on TV, or Ann Paris, or Melvin Wampat said that it's racist, on and on and on. And if you read the Insular cases, if you read Downs, that isn't what it says. It just plain isn't what it says. Now, I've got a portion of Downs here that I can't finish off between now and the end of the show. So I think I'll just check out and see who's on Facebook. But we're going to come back to this tomorrow, and I'll finish it up, I promise. And then tomorrow we're going to talk about WAPO versus Biden, where even the Washington Compost calls out Biden for a liar. Okay, so let's see who we got here on Facebook today. First guy who posted was this guy, Bob Klitzkie, who said, "Let us begin." And Pam Duvall jumps right in there. And then we've got Janice Wong, who used to be she used to be first almost always. I haven't seen her, you know, it's been quite a while. I'm glad she's back. Welcome back, Janice. And then Colin Clark, off of Brown. And let's see, we've got Sherry Iriarte is here, and Sandra Regis, a very faithful poster. And Colin Clark says they'll also play with it on the range without your knowledge. I wonder what he's talking about. Firearms, I guess, huh? Yeah. And then Sandra Regis says, I wonder how much money was wasted on the wall since Biden stopped everything. A bunch, right? And then we've got a new comment here. Peter J. Santos. Did you hear what I said? Peter J. Santos?
Did you just repeat yourself?
I did just repeat myself. It's repeat. Who says, beware Neil Weir, the unwitting saviorist who might ironically destroy what he purports to save. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, that's Neil Weir, who's always running around. He sees a group of people heading in a particular direction, runs and gets in front of them and says, hey, follow me, you guys. Neil's for the people, though. You know, he wants the people to be, and what he did as far as America and Samoa is really something. He was able to convince a judge in one of the states, Utah, that people born in American Samoa are citizens by birth. Even the government of American Samoa is against that particular proposition, just like Peter Santos said. Okay, so that's the end of it for today. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
How might you go about paying for that? The Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, within the last week had floated the idea of maybe there being a mileage tax, but has recently said that's not going to happen. He's also said that the Biden administration is not going to increase the gas tax. We did hear from the press secretary, Jen Psaki, as she was asked, well, might the top individual rate go back up once again to nearly 40%? Maybe would there be an increase in estate taxes? At this point, the White House is not yet willing to get into specifics.
Fox's Blake Berman. The White House is signaling a tax increase would be on the country's wealthiest and on corporations. Yesterday, for the first time, the Biden administration allowed journalists inside a border detention facility for migrant children.
The capacity in this temporary processing facility in Donna, Texas, is just 250 people during the pandemic, but now they're at more than 4,000. 1,200 of them are children, and 39 of them have been held here for over 15 days. The legal limit is just 72 hours.
Fox's Kristen Fisher. Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas tells Fox News conditions are unacceptable.
These are the Biden cages. For 4 years, we heard Democrats in the media screaming about kids in cages under Donald Trump.
The Biden administration says it's doing everything possible to create more space by using convention centers in cities across Texas and even military bases. And the man that planned the Watergate break-in that led to President Nixon's resignation has died. G. Gordon Liddy was 90 years old. America's listening to Fox News.